Hey guys, it's Scott Payne from PM Master Prep, and in this video, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about plan stakeholder engagements. Now, this is 13.2. We're in the planning process group. This is the stakeholder management knowledge area. You know that. We know that kicking off great stakeholder engagement is essential to great projects, and it is essential to answering all the PMP questions that we have. So this kicks off a lot of our implementation, how we talk, how we engage, how we interact with our stakeholders. So we want to make sure that we nail down this process. Going to be a lot of questions on it on the PMP exam, and it's going to help you in your regular world. So let's jump into the details. All right, so plan stakeholder engagement. Let's go through the summary. Why are we here? What are we doing? What have we gotten from previous processes? So what in this process, what we're trying to do, our goal, our focus is to develop a customized approach on how to engage each stakeholder based on their unique needs and expectations. Wow. Now, it is a big thing. Now, coming at a project with that perspective to say, I'm not going to blanket treat everybody the same. I'm going to uniquely engage them and communicate to them based on their unique needs and my needs from them is a detailed approach. It's a very sophisticated way to think through these things. So that's why the PMBOK is trying to push this out to you to help communicate this information to you, because it is very, very important. It's a great philosophy. So a lot of our questions on the PMP exam are going to be related to communication and the stakeholder engagement. I want you to think of those two as twins, as cousins, as brothers, as sisters. They go together, basically. Now, that's what I'm getting at, right? And so the stakeholder engagement plan that we're going to create here is a key input to all our communication management processes. Plan communication, manage communication, monitor communication, back and forth. These two knowledge areas play together a ton. So let's nail down what we're trying to do in stakeholder engagement. Now, we said customize approach to communicate and engage our stakeholders, right? And so what are we going to do? We're going to incorporate the detailed information related to each stakeholders to help us define, first of all, what is our current and what is our future, our desired engagement level for that individual stakeholder. Isn't that powerful? Isn't that powerful to know that? Where are they now? Where do we want them to be? And then this process helps us make that jump, helps us push them and guide them to the place where we need them, okay, for the project. So current versus desired engagement. And then by doing that, we're going to create not just hopes and dreams and wishes, actionable stakeholder engagement strategies. That's what the plan is to achieve our desired engagement that we want, okay, from each stakeholder. So it's stakeholder engagement plan, not only important in this knowledge area, but it's used by other processes, right? So 13.3, as we go through this knowledge area, we're going to foster and increase our stakeholder support by using the plans and processes that we establish here. That's in the managed stakeholder engagement process. So think about that as we go into our next process in executing. We're going to use these things that we define here. And then also as we go into monitoring and controlling, we're going to monitor the effectiveness and tweak our approaches and how we deal with our stakeholders in that 13.4 monitor stakeholder engagement. And like I said, every single one of the communication processes that we do in that knowledge area uses this output as an input. Really, really powerful. See how this feeds in there? The communication and the stakeholder engagement is one of the key flows. It actually it's a mishmash. It's a hodgepodge. It's like gumbo in a sense, if you know what that is. Okay, go and Google gumbo. It's a combination of a lot of things that turns out, if done right, just to taste so good. So that's what we're doing here with engagement and communications, all right? And so stakeholder engagement, the plan, is a key input to a lot of processes, namely the communication, and we want to set ourselves on the path of success, and this is how we do it. Let's look at this output. Very, very simple. Input, output, tools, and techniques. What's the only one over there? Very, very key. Stakeholder engagement plan. So you know, in this planning process group, when we get into the stakeholder world, what are we producing? Engagement plan. We want to get those people from our current to our desired engagement level. This is how we do it. All right. So what are we going to use as inputs? Well, what do we have at this point, right? We got the charter. It's going to tell us where we want to be, what our expectations are. It's going to guide us on the stakeholders that we should have. We've already used that information in 13.1, remember? And so the charter helps us. We use all our project management plans on the communication management plan, the risks that are identified. That's going to help us frame up how we communicate, who we communicate to based on the the risks and how we communicate and what the resources we have are, we need to communicate to the people that we get resources from and we're going to use resources with. So think about that. Then as far as documents, the one I want to focus on first is the mother of this process. This is where it all comes in through. That's the stakeholder register. And where do we make that? Where do we produce that? 13.1, identify stakeholders, right? That was in the initiating process group, second process that we ever did. That's beautiful. And so what we did there was we identified tons of stakeholders and we started to classify them. You know, whether they're on board, off board, engaged, not engaged, if they're impacted, if they have power, all those things we've identified there. We're taking that raw material, that really good understanding that we have, and we're taking it to the next level. And we're starting to apply specific action plan to each stakeholder based on the need of where we need them, how they need to interact, and best, how we can serve them. Okay. And so as we do that, we're also going to use a lot of our documents to feed in, and we'll talk through those. So how do we do that? How do we jump from the raw materials that we have to the outputs, which is stakeholder engagement plan? The reason why, the way we do that is by using expert judgment. Obviously, anytime we go in here, we want to leverage expert judgment. Then we could benchmark the way other people do it. We could do some different analysis to understand how best to make the jump. And then we're going to have to prioritize and rank both our decisions on who to deal with and how we deal with them, okay? And so after we do that, in that process, we're going to do a lot of visualization in the form of how we represent the data through mind mapping, through stakeholder engagement matrices, and then we're going to go through, it's going to create a great understanding of where we are, where we need to go, and how we're going to get there. So I'm going to teach you how we get there in this process. Let's go into the output. Let's talk about that stakeholder engagement plan. Now, what we said, when we have that, look below. We're going to take those stakeholders, we're going to understand their needs, we're going to understand where we need them, and we're going to document the specific actions and the strategies that we're going to use on this project and our team is going to use to deliver the desired level of engagement. Whether they're right where we want them or where we need them, we need to understand how we're going to get them there, okay? And so that's what we see in the document below. Look at what the contents are in there. It's a subsidiary plan of the project management plan, obviously, and it's developed early after we identify 13.1 of identify stakeholders. As soon as we do that, we get into this, right? And we refine this through the entire project. As we implement these things and we start dealing with our stakeholders, we're going to constantly come back and modify this to make sure that we can refine our ability to deal with them in the best possible way. All right. Stakeholders change, realize that. Stakeholders change, we get new ones, we get old ones, and then their perception of us changes. So we must be cognizant of that and reactive to that. Okay. So let's look a little bit at this stakeholder engagement plan. This is just an example. We'd have the name of the stakeholder. We'd have their influence. We'd have their current level of engagement, the target level of engagement. So we see that gap. All right. And then we'd have our strategies and then our risk or barriers. So this is giving us a better understanding. We're going in deeper, right? Okay. So this plan is going to help us inform, like we said, our communication approach and our method use too. So what are our inputs? The stakeholder register really supplies the raw materials, right? Then our project plans and documents and our charter and our different agreement provide more color, more detail, more perspective so that we can select and pick the best engagement approach that we need. So the charter, what does it do? It defines the purpose because everybody, we're trying to move them toward a centralized purpose. Our objectives, the same thing. Our success criteria, everything must support that. Now in our project plans, how we implement our project matters, and it's going to implement how we communicate and how we engage, all right? So our resources, our communication, and our risk management plan all bring in details, all bring in the methods and processes that we use. And then as we get into project documents, think about it. The granddaddy of them all, the thing that feeds it in is the stakeholder register, right? Created in 13.1. That is where we get our baseline assessment of our stakeholders and our classification. And that's going to help us prioritize which ones need the most attention and which ones don't, which ones are the most impactful and which ones aren't. Okay, that's where we start from. And then issue log, change log, assumption log, risk register are all going to continually feed in here and help us evolve this stakeholder management plan as we go through the project. So this is the first time we're doing this, it helps you understand like, hey, oh, we're doing this the first time, but realize we're going to do this a lot. This is iterative, right? Okay, so let's talk about more inputs. All right, so how are we going to develop our management plan? Well, we have to take all those inputs and we have to do some kind of work, some kind of analysis. And we're going to start with data analysis, okay? And so that's going to help us clarify our understanding of all our stakeholders, interpret and bring in all our additional information, and then start to identify the specific things that we can do, all right? So we're going to talk about types of analysis that we can do to make sense of the stakeholders that we have now. The first thing we're going to do is assumption and constraint analysis. Now, what does that mean? Now, this helps us clarify each stakeholder's assumptions and their current constraints. If we understand those, we can apply attention and resources to help them guide to the correct assumptions and the correct constraints. And then we can address the strategies to be most effective, okay? So as we go forth, we've done assumptions and constraint analysis of our stakeholders. Then we want to run into root cause. Why are our people disengaged? Why are our stakeholders not following us? If we understand that, we can address our actions directly on those points. So we don't want to just guess. We want to understand what the actual problems are. And through interviews and other things, facilitated conversations, we can get to those root causes, which is really great. And so as we go into this, we start going through here, we start prioritizing and ranking, our stakeholders to understand which ones have the most impact, which ones are most highly correlated to our project performance, and we could put attention toward the highest ranked people, okay? So we're gonna be doing that continually, all right? So we've done this analysis. How do we make sense of it? How do we represent it? How do we organize it? And the way we do that is we're going to use a couple different techniques. We're going to do mind mapping, and I'll show you, and we're going to use stakeholder engagement matrices. Really, really clean, clear, easy to do things. And the reason why we're doing this is we need to understand stakeholder relationships as they evolve through the processes, and we need to understand our current versus desired engagement, okay? So if we don't understand that, we don't know where to focus our engagement, all right? So mind mapping. This is the first thing we might do. And this might show how different stakeholders are related, how they engage each other, what their relationships are. That can be very, very powerful if you think through it. If this person has a good relationship with the other person, or their influence over that person, or they work for that person, or vice versa, then that can be leveraged strategically to help us get to the desired engagement level. All right. And then as we go into more detail, we can use something called a stakeholder engagement matrix. And this you're going to have a question on. I guarantee you that you're going to have a question on the PMP exam. All right. So this visually compares the current and desired engagement levels. Now you might not see this chart, the actual image on your exam, but it'll talk about how do we adjust and how do we assess our stakeholder engagement? How do we push them toward it? Remember, communication, engagement, focus plans, right? So what this does here, let's look at it. It says each stakeholder, top to bottom, 1 to 3. This is just an example. And it shows the different states they could be in relative to our project. They could be unaware of it. They could be resistant. They could be neutral, on the fence, whatever. They could be supportive, or they could be leading. That's the team that we want a lot, right? We want leading people, the right people to be leading strategically, our leaders, right? And so they have the 5 categories. And what we're going to do is we're going to place a C, current level of engagement, on each stakeholder based on where they are across this chart. So if we see stakeholder 1, that current person is now at this moment unaware of our project. Okay, but we need them not only to be aware of it, but we need them to be supportive. That's where the D occurs, desired, okay? And as we go down, we see stakeholder 2 is neutral right now, currently. We need him to move to supportive. And then the third thing, this is great, our third stakeholder is currently supportive, and our desired is supportive. So as we look through this, we can start to equate which person we need to put actions toward. Now, stakeholder 3 is already where we need them. So that's just maintenance activities, right? Keep them informed, understand what they need, get them what they need, make sure that they stay in the supportive neighborhood. Less work, logically, probably, than 1 or 2. 1, we have to introduce them to the project. So how are we going to do that? And how are we going to know what would be valuable to them and get them to the point of being a supportive member? So this helps crystallize in our mind where we need to focus our attention, where we need to put our energy. And this is really, really important. It shows the relative importance of each stakeholder and how they influence the amount of effort that we're allocating to ensure engagement. So this is our mechanism for helping to do that. All right. So We've covered all these things. You know that the big output here is the stakeholder engagement plan, one of the big subsidiaries, right? And that this feeds into all the communication processes. Those go back and forth. And that this process, along with all the other stakeholder engagement processes, are iterative. We're going to continue to go through this. We're continuing to assess our stakeholders. How are we doing? Are our engagement techniques working in later processes? And what do we need to do to modify them? So we modify them in here. So we're going to continually go through here. Now, your next step is to go to the John video. We're going to talk about how John is doing these activities in his process. Watch that. Ask yourself, what would you do in those situations? Question your thoughts on how you understand this process. What would the project manager do next in these different situations? Prepare yourself for those PMP exam questions. Then after that, go take your box quiz. You're going to do great. Keep pushing through. Before you know it, we'll be all the way through this. You're going to get your PMP